Hi, I'm Corey. This is Becky.
Becky.
I am a 27-year-old queer, non-binary, intersex human, and Becky is my. Am I allowed to share your age?
Oh yeah.
Becky is my 57-year-old cisgender, heterosexual-ish, maybe. 57-year-old cisgender, maybe questioning at best. Partner in crime. Together we are the Firepit, which is part of the greater Lighthouse project. I am so thrilled to have you join us today. This is our debut of the Firepit. So a little rundown on how it's typically going to go. Typically our episodes are going to be about 45 minutes long. We're going to try to give you new content around every 2 weeks or so, hopefully, if everything goes well in our lives. Um, this week we are talking about story and whatever that means, whatever that conjures up, and then we will pull next week's, or not next week, but our next episode's topic from this jar here, from one of these little pieces of paper towards the end of the episode. And we are always welcome also to user requests, follower requests. So hit that subscribe button, give us your input, give us your feedback. We'd love to hear your story someday. So without further ado, yeah, let's talk about story. Um, Story is the basis of the Lighthouse Project. I am really passionate about storytelling. I think stories that are shared in safe spaces build community. They deteriorate shame. There's a lot of good, I think, that can come from sharing your story. And I also love vulnerability, and that is huge in sharing your story. Last month, Becky shared part of her story related to celebrating her 10 years of sobriety from alcohol, which is an incredible accomplishment. I cannot thank you, praise you enough, say how proud I am of you enough. Like,
Thank you.
so amazed, so
Thank
proud.
you.
So, what does story invoke for you?
I think for me it and probably I'm thinking like in a macro social worker type
Right.
of way, but for me, sharing story, you find commonalities, you find differences, and I think in the commonalities, that's where you find home and support and the social network, and in the differences, that's where you grow and
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
and hopefully have healthy debate, you know.
I
And
think.
I think
Go ahead.
that is so invaluable to forming your whole being,
Right.
that shared story.
I completely agree. That's why I love story. And I know that there are pieces of my story that like I would be completely remiss to not share. Like, for example, May is Borderline Personality Awareness Month, and I have borderline personality disorder, and my story absolutely would not be the same without borderline personality disorder. I can't imagine my life without it. Part of my story, or a huge part of my story, does revolve around borderline personality disorder. One of my biggest symptoms of borderline personality disorder is like having a favorite person. And when I have that favorite person, I'm often like very romantically attracted to this person. And so I've had a lot of like very quick, very volatile relationships that have 100% shaped me into the person that I am today. And that goes to your point about like commonalities and growth. Like, the way my brain works with borderline personality disorder is I see the commonalities immediately, and that can help contribute to me putting somebody on a pedestal, and viewing them as this like greater person than they are. And then when the differences come, it's like there's this whole new person. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not at all who I thought I knew and who I thought I was like in love with. And it can cause a lot of struggle and strife between us. And I used to really, really resent that piece of it, I guess, the strife and the struggle and the differences. Um, but recently I've realized how much they've helped me grow, and I can
Mm-hmm.
see the growth. Like, oh, this person and I have different ideas about what a relationship should be, or like what the expectations are in a relationship, or like, oh, I don't like the way that like this person treated me. I don't like this difference. So let me avoid that difference with future folks. Um, and I don't know, it is interesting, like watching yourself grow. Like,
Mm-hmm.
have you ever experienced that?
For sure. I mean, um, Paul dying and my mother dying, I mean, changed me forever.
For
But
the viewers, by the way, Paul
mm,
is her deceased husband. I was never fortunate enough to meet him, but he sounds, from what I've heard, like just a truly incredible human being.
yeah,
So I would have loved to have met him.
yeah, but like that changed me in going through the ups and downs of grief and like a full on breakdown and like when you're in it you think this is it, but it when you see yourself get through it um, and just the dramatic changes that happened in my life, that would not have happened if I hadn't gone through that. Yeah, and I realized going through that, like how strong I was.
Yeah, you are
You know,
incredibly strong. So obviously, like Paul dying and your mom dying, those are pieces of your story that I think changed it irrevocably. Are there anything else? Is there anything else that you feel like your story would not be the same without this happening?
um, I think there's a lot um, of little things, or that seemingly little. Um, I mean, the fact that I moved around
Mm,
so much um, changed me a lot in very different ways in different places. Like I think I shared with you the other day, until I lived in Arizona, I never voted.
oh yeah, you did share that with me, which I find wild,
Yeah,
by the way. Uh,
because I grew up, my parents didn't vote. I didn't think anything about it,
mm,
until I was exposed to people who were very politically active, and and that's when I started taking, things more seriously.
I think that's really fair. Like another part of my story that would be I would be completely remiss to not acknowledge is my activism, is my
Hmm.
advocacy, is my organizing. Um, and like I've always been pretty politically active and pretty politically aware. Like I'm privileged enough that I have a political cartoonist as a father, and he's like very left leaning, and so I grew up in that context. And then like my name's Corey. My short name is Corey. My legal name is Corazon. Um, but my mom specifically, and has always said this like through my entire life, like she chose to call me Corey instead of Corazon, partly because like Corazon is difficult for uh, white folks to pronounce. And yes, this is a call out, white people. Learn cultural competency, please. I say this as a white person. But she's called me Corey in part also because she didn't want people to make assumptions about me based on my gender, which I find wildly hilarious now as this, like, hugely openly queer, intersex, non-binary human. Like, gender, apparently I also don't want people to make assumptions about me based on gender. Don't make assumptions about people based on gender. Everyone here, no thank you. But I look at that upbringing and I look at, like, where I am now. You know, recently I've testified at the state house. I'm working in two queer organizations in my town. My whole passion and purpose beyond storytelling feels like advocacy and activism and the pursuit of justice, just kind of across the board. And I do think storytelling is a huge piece of that because
Oh yeah.
there's definitely a certain narrative that is taught in society, in classrooms. History is written by the side of the victor, right? Like, but there are so many other sides to the stories that we think we're so familiar with, that we know so well. And without somebody being brave enough to share their story.
Right.
I think also back to, like, oral traditions, right? Where, you know, predating writing, or in families and communities still where literacy is not um, not necessarily like a value, or is not necessarily a skill that has been provided. Like, entire histories are known because of storytelling. In some cultures, that's the only way that their culture persists.
Native
and, like,
Americans
right,
typically pass down verbally.
right, and a lot of other, like, indigenous cultures do too, and, like, tribal cultures, and I think there's a real beauty in that. I feel like there's a really strong culture that can be built in storytelling, and because of storytelling, like fables and proverbs and
it's literally community.
Literally, right?
Yeah,
right. And without those stories, those communities wouldn't exist, and it's not quite the same as, like, you know, I have borderline personality disorder and I'm queer and I live in the southeast of the United States of America, and I find community with anyone across the world, really, that is also diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, is also part of the LGBTQIA community. Like, yes, that is community that I find through storytelling. And, like, there are, especially within, like, the LGBTQIA community, there's definitely, like, cultures and subcultures, and we can get into that. That's a whole different podcast episode, I think. But it's not the same as maintaining a history, building a history, maintaining a culture. Like, story has so much power.
For sure.
Like,
for me, like in recovery, telling my story helps heal me, but also listening to everybody's story as well is healing and hopeful, and gives you that inspiration and support and sense of family.
Yes. Yes, I think that's so important. Like, in my darkest moments in my life where I really wasn't sure sometimes that like I was gonna make it through these,
Mm-hmm.
like sharing my story, you're right, absolutely did help. And even if it was like just writing my story with
Yeah.
the concept that someone might read it someday and they might learn something from what I
Right.
went through, that helped. And then, like you said, also hearing other people's stories and realizing I'm not alone.
Right.
Like, there are other people who have survived this. Other people are surviving this every day. And if they can do it
Mm-hmm.
and thrive, then, like,
Mm-hmm.
why can't I? I can. So I
And
will. And I
yeah,
do.
and it also keeps you, I guess, humble in a way because it's like everybody has ups and downs and things
Yes.
like that, and so when you have like a down moment, it's not like, oh my god, I'm the only person in the world. It's like,
Right.
no, we have this community that.
Right. And I think it helps keep things in perspective, too. Like,
Mhm.
everyone, even if they are experiencing something similar in very similar circumstances, everyone's story is 100% unique, which I also love. Like, even in these communities, no two people are going to have the same story. It's just not possible based on, their biology, based on their environment, based on life circumstances. No one's going to have the same story. Um, and I think, especially, you're talking about like recovery. And sometimes I feel like I'm like recovering from borderline personality disorder. Like, I think sometimes remembering, like, if when you hear a story that's so similar to your own and it triggers that thought of like, oh wow, like I used to be there and now look how far I've come. And then when you see someone or you hear a story from someone who is further along in their journey than you are, oh wow, look how far they've come. Like, look at everything
Mhm.
they're doing. Look how far I still can grow. And I think that's really beautiful too. Like,
Yeah.
I don't ever want to stop learning and growing. And
No.
like, I don't want to ever feel like I've got it all figured out because I don't really think anyone's got it all figured out.
I think when you stop learning and growing and analyzing and really thinking about things and forming your ideas and stuff. When you stop that, you're going to go downhill.
Right,
Is what I think.
right. And that's the only place you can go. If,
Yeah,
if you're at the top,
yeah.
the only place to go is down.
It's if you don't keep the mind engaged, there's really no point because I think
Right,
the rest of it shuts down.
right. I think not only would I be bored, I do think I would regress. I think, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I could see my stubborn self, like, oh, cool, I've learned everything there is to know about relationships, which I don't think is ever possible for anybody,
It
especially not
can't be.
myself. But like, oh, I've learned everything there is to know. Let me screw it up this way this time. Let's see how I can fix it that way. Um, I don't. I know myself well enough to know that if I felt too successful, I might self sabotage.
I often think that because I have friends that have these high power jobs, and to me, it's like I couldn't, even if I was qualified. I'm like, I guess it's like imposter syndrome or something, but I would be a nervous wreck in something like that because I would be like, I don't know what I'm doing. How can they think I know what I'm doing? They just,
Right.
it just seems like the craziest thing. I think I went off on a tangent.
About no. I mean, I can see the thread.
Okay.
Um, I do worry about self sabotage. Like I said, I'm working in two queer organizations in my town, and I love both of them so much. And there's a piece of me that's like, do I deserve this? And I do. I do. I have fought very hard to get to this point. But like, I pinch me. Like, is it real? Right? Like,
Yeah.
and it is. And I'm just so excited to see like where I can grow and learn in this new
Mm-hmm.
like building the life that I've always wanted stage of my life,
Yeah.
which is awesome. And I don't know. I feel like that's how you would be too if you were in a big high power position like you were talking about. I don't know that it would be imposter syndrome. I think you would see it as a challenge and as an opportunity to learn and grow. Because I think even when you're at the top of this like corporate ladder, hopefully you are always thinking of ways to continue growing and continue improving.
Yeah. I think about it. That's why I left.
Oh, well,
Because I was like, I was just doing something because it was a paycheck and I knew how to do it.
oh, well, that's
It was not good.
an existence that I
Yeah.
think anybody would want.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's why I ultimately left. Um, I thought about another way of storytelling
Mm-hmm.
that you and I both have
Oh yeah,
tattoos,
yeah,
which is a depiction,
yeah,
of an
yeah,
artistic way
yeah. Um,
that tells a story and
yeah. I love
could be
tattoos.
interpreted all kinds of ways by
Right,
other people.
right. I love tattoos for that very like for those very reasons. Like my tattoos, I feel like definitely do tell a story, and I'll let y'all determine what that story is. Um, I know that I mean each individual tattoo for me tells a whole story. So like the
Hmm.
whole collection is more like a novel, I guess.
Right.
Like
Well, it's a life.
it is a life. It is a life, and like
Yeah.
I so desperately want more because
Me too.
there's so much of my life that I want to memorialize in a tattoo that I
Mm,
just haven't had the money. Tattoos are expensive,
they're
y'all.
very expensive. But it's interesting, and I'm all color
hmm
and you're black and gray.
Which I think is opposite of like we were
And
talking
then
about this
I
earlier.
only wear
Like
black.
our aesthetics, as you can see, we did not plan to look as differently as we do. We didn't organize our outfits at all.
Right.
But I do think this is very indicative of like who we are as people. So like
Yeah.
I give this like bubbly, colorful external persona, which like is I mean legitimate and valid. Like I am genuinely for other people a ray of sunshine, and I'm definitely very queer, and I don't hide that at all. But for myself, I can be dark to myself.
Hmm.
Um, and I do think in black and white thinking. That's part of having borderline personality disorder. Um, and so I think it's just interesting, like, the clothing and the tattoos together tell an even more complete story. And I think clothing is a way people share their story too. Like,
For sure.
I can think of very few things that are more self expressive than clothing, especially
I
when
agree.
you find your kind of aesthetic and groove. And
Yeah.
like, you can always change and grow in that too. Like, there's not
Yeah.
an area in life I don't think where you ever stop changing and
Yeah.
growing.
But when you wear something and you feel good and
Hmm.
feel like it really represents the confidence that you have
Right,
and self-esteem, it's very empowering.
right, exactly.
And yeah, it definitely tells a story. And when that comes internally into you, everybody else can see it too, and
Right,
so you're projecting
right.
that story.
And I don't know about you or like any of the viewers, but like I feel like my aesthetic, like there's always a similar feel, I guess. Like it all looks like maybe the same person owns it, but like I feel like 7 different people live in my closet. Um, and I think that tells a story too. Like I think the variety, like I mean, I can relate everything back to borderline personality disorder. Like, so one of the characteristics of borderline personality disorder is lack of sense of self, and I do have a solid sense of who I am now, but I joke and say that my aesthetics of the day are my gender of the day, and maybe that's also because I'm non-binary is everything. But like I don't know, I think it's fun to tap into these different sides of myself and see which different story I want to tell that day. And it's wild. Like, I feel like my whole demeanor shifts with my outfit.
Oh, for sure.
Even if I'm, like, equally confident in, like, this sexy all black outfit and equally confident in what I have on today, the side of me that wears rainbow eyeshadow and whose favorite color is yellow and, you know, wears daisy and alien earrings, like that's my fun side. And I want to be fun today. I want this podcast to be engaging for folks. Doesn't mean that I don't feel confident. I feel very confident today.
I feel pretty good today. You know, I'm in my black. I'm in my comfort zone.
I was gonna say that exact phrase to you. Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, I feel good today.
Good.
I think mine is I express my colorful side through my tattoos.
I think so, and like I think it's interesting. Like my clothing changes every day, but your tattoos will always be the same. And so I think that really speaks to like the warmth and colorfulness that is like inherent like to you, you know, because it really doesn't take you very long. You're not a hard shell to crack.
No.
So, you know, I think once you get through that shell, and again, it's not hard, folks. Like, it's,
really, I think it's probably because I'm less shy now than I used to be. Cause
I can't imagine you ever being shy.
Oh, it was horrible.
Tell us about that part of your story.
Well, I couldn't speak in front of people at all, like not even introduce myself.
Oh wow.
Because I was so afraid, and it was terrifying to me. So a lot of times my quietness was taken as like aloofness or whatever. You know, people would not like me until they got to know me. But it took me a long time to be myself with people.
I have such a difficult time seeing that. Like, y'all don't understand because y'all don't know Becky very well yet. I'm hoping that like you will hit that subscribe button and you will get to know Becky and I through this podcast, which also, I meant to say this earlier, we do apologize. We did hope to have equipment for today, but that just wasn't in the cards. So
things happen.
Yes, things happen. Life happens, stories happen. And I felt like it was more important I think we both felt like it was more important to get this out into the world and have y'all grow with us. Hopefully grow with us, please. We've got so much to share.
And share your story
in
the comments.
Absolutely, yes. In the comments, I will also drop like the Lighthouse email address if you feel more comfortable contacting us that way, which is a little bit more private than YouTube comment pages.
Yeah.
And if you feel so inclined to share your story, please do. The Lighthouse Project as a whole is not just this fire pit situation. We have monthly events. So far, we have talked about race and gender and social work in the American South. We talked about Becky's sobriety from alcohol. Now we're talking about story in general, and the fire pit will be kind of our like touch base with everyone between the bigger capstone events. So there will be the next episode of the fire pit will air on June 11th. June 11th.
June 11th, yeah.
Um, June
We
11th.
still can't figure out why we think.
My family's coming into town, but they won't be until later.
Okay.
That's my thing. I don't know what you've got going on.
Yeah, I have no idea.
But so the next episode of the fire pit will be on June 11th. We will pull the subject from this little jar in just a second, and then after the fire pit topic for June, I will also be facilitating a panel about growing up queer and trans in Southern rural and religious households. So be on the lookout for information about that. I'm really excited for the folks we've got lined up to speak. I think they've both got really interesting stories to share. So stay tuned. In fact, while we are here, it's a little early, but we've got like 10 minutes before our 40-minute timer went off, but we're already here. So let's
go ahead and
draw for next week. Or not next week, for June 11th. June 11th is the next air date. I keep saying next week, but the next podcast date, June 11th. Our topic will be... Yeah.
I can't.
Ooh, we're going to be talking, I don't know if y'all can read that, but it is
incarceration.
Backwards. It is backwards. Oops. Incarceration. I'm an abolitionist, so that'll be an interesting conversation.
And I have some opinions on incarceration and the justice system.
I think this will be a hot and heavy time on June 11th.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that I have anything else to say about story. Do you have anything to kind of tie us back, bring us back?
I don't know. I think just I think we could wrap it up with, don't, only stay with like-minded people or your generation or whatever, because like you and I think that we definitely have commonalities, but I think in some of our differences is where we've experienced so much growth and learning and just perspectives on and appreciation for both sides. And I think that's what I would say to people. If there's a out of the ordinary type relationship that you would have, go for it. Really lean into that, is that you really do grow and learn.
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think if you look at your circle, whatever your circle looks like, and you see a pretty homogenous image, whether that's physically or in the way people think, maybe do some reevaluating, because maybe you're a little bit stuck in your current mentality, and if you were able to engage in conversation. I know it's so hard right now. The whole world is so polarized right now. And I'm not saying be friends with people who don't want you to exist. There's definitely a line where there is too much difference, but I also think people can get so comfortable in what they know that they don't grow. So take a look at your circles and try to figure out who's missing, and see how you can engage with those folks in a way that isn't tokenizing, because we also absolutely do not support tokenizing in this house. But
I think we were an unlikely pairing.
Yes, but I frankly never would have anticipated myself pulling together a podcast with someone 30 years my senior. Who, yes, we hold a lot of very similar beliefs, but
But we have
We
such different
have such different
experiences.
experiences.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting. But like I said, it's so interesting.
100%. And like Becky's like genuinely my best friend, I think. Like,
Aw.
so the fact that like I'm 27 and queer and intersex and non-binary and like I have other identifiers too. Those are just the ones that I relate to the most days. Um, and I'm best friends with a 57-year-old cisgender hetero questioning. I swear to God, the number of times this woman has
Yeah.
said, I think I might have a crush on this woman.
It's really more. It's
Make
like
it.
it's not an attraction crush. It's like I think they're the coolest thing. Like Diane Keaton. I like have a huge crush on Diane Keaton, but I don't
Fair
want
enough.
to date her.
Fair enough. Drop in the comments what you think. And with that, we'll see you on June 11th to talk about incarceration. Thanks, folks. Have a good
Bye. Have a
day.
good night.